Hello, fitness business nerds. I have a really exciting announcement for you. Are you ready? You've heard me talk about Unicorn Society a million times in this podcast, and right now, enrollment is open to join. So if you've heard us talking about it and you're thinking, gosh, I would really love to be part of that group someday, now is your moment. Early bird enrollment is open right now. Between now and June 12th, you can get our best possible rate for joining Unicorn Society. And in the group, you will have access to me and Mark Fisher and Pete Dupuis and Ben Pickard as your coaches to help you grow your business. And so now is the moment. We only do enrollment twice per year, right? So this is your last chance to join the group this year. You'll have to wait until 2023 if you don't join right now. So go find the link or visit businessforunicorns.com now and apply to join Unicorn Society before June 12th to get our best possible rate. I really hope you join, and I hope we get to work together soon. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Hello, Pete. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. We're into the busy season. I'm making money.
Oh, that's good. That's better than losing money.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't in the losing money season, thankfully, but we weren't in the making a lot of money season.
Yes. Good.
So
Good.
we are, I think we have 7 evaluations today, and that's about what we'll do. Every day we're open for the next 2-3 weeks while we onboard all the college guys who just keep coming back together at the same time. How are you?
They are doing the right thing. I'm good. I am well. We are keelerless today, sad to say. But that's okay, because while the keeler is away, the mice will play. And as it happens, today's topic is one that you and I will likely have more depth of emotional scars and trauma as it relates to it. So Pete, do you want to, since it was your idea, would you like to tee our listeners up for what we'll be discussing today?
Sure. So a great deal of our
sure, I can feel it already.
Let's do this. A good deal of the subject matter for this podcast originates in coaching calls. At least that's how I think about it. And one of the one question that has shown up on more than 1 or 2 occasions recently, and by recently I mean the last, let's say 90 days, has been how to manage the coach who has gone deep down the insert acronym protocol name here rabbit hole. And so I'm not going
KFC rabbit hole.
Exactly. So I'm not going to go out of my way to specify any of these acronyms. I think our listeners are pretty familiar with the wonderful variety of things that end in C. And so, actually, no, there's a variety of them. But what has happened in my operation dating back to like 2008, this wasn't really a problem in the early days, but I do remember in 2008, well, you know what, fuck it, I have to use some acronyms. Eric Cressy went to a PRI conference, and I had not heard of PRI, and I'm not sure really anyone had. And he came back and he was like, guys, I just had my mind blown. I want to change some of the things we're doing around here. And this was in the stage that I would call healthy introduction of the acronyms, because he was like, I want to do an in-service. I have all these ideas. You're not going to believe the stuff I learned. And it was cool. He was fired up. He was excited to think about how we could insert these into our training philosophy, not make them our training philosophy. And it was great, because I think he had a little bit of a hand in helping kind of disseminate their messaging to our little bubble. Because
definitely
excited about it early. And it became a tool in his toolbox, not his singular toolbox. And that's why it worked. However, we found this shift in our industry a handful of years after that, where we trended toward what I would call more of a celebration of guruism than actual kind of introducing new skills and concepts to an existing system. And it became a problem that I've seen more and more consistently since. And admittedly, just last week, I had a call with a member of Unicorn Society who said, I have a staff member who is really drinking the Kool-Aid. And as a result, it feels a little bit like they've become the elitist coach on our staff, who is intellectually above everybody else. And just their ideas are too complex for everyone else to understand.
Right.
And so I said, hey, Mark and Michael, I think we should talk about this because I know it's not the first time I've heard this question and dealt with it in my own operation. And based on your reaction, I know you've seen it as well. So
Yes.
thoughts?
Yeah, gosh, so many thoughts. The first thing I will share is I'll offer a thought that is not necessarily an apology per se for when this happens, but a little bit of maybe some context for my perception of why I think this happens. And maybe I'm correct or maybe I'm not. But my assessment is there are two things that lead to this becoming a challenge. And the first one, I think, is very understandable, which is to say that the thing that made Eric unique, even at that moment in his development and in the development of our industry, was Eric already had a schema, already had a foundation, a philosophy of training that allowed him to take pieces of PRI and integrate it into his system without adopting it wholesale and throwing out a lot of what he was doing and completely changing what's happening overnight. I think what happens is, and certainly to be clear, we're not picking on PRI by any means. I think it's an amazing system. It has certainly been very influential in the way that both CSP and MFF coach movement. So I have a lot of amazing things to say about that. I will say, speaking not specifically about PRI, but broadly all of the three-letter acronyms, because they are generally three-letter acronyms. What happens is oftentimes a younger coach, for reasons that I think make sense, adopt the entire system because in some cases, they don't have an existing foundation of knowledge based on where they're at in their journey. They don't have a really rigorous training philosophy systems that they're going to slot stuff into. And there's probably an argument to be made that in that situation, there's something to be said for taking on the whole system and not trying to do a Frankenstein thing, which arguably they might be less successful at than someone like Eric. So if I can offer a business analogy for this, I think this is somewhat akin to a relatively novice business owner reading a book, one of the commercially available platforms. We talk about Traction a lot, but maybe Traction, maybe 12-week year, maybe Measure What Matters, maybe Scaling Up, fill in the blank. There's probably a case to be made sometimes for those business owners to take the whole system together because they're not in a place that they can really pull and use the pieces that are going to make most sense, right? So now, again, I still think ultimately, as we zoom out to the business owner's perspective, this isn't necessarily a good thing, but I think it makes sense. I think the other reason that this tends to make sense is humans are going to crave increasing levels of complexity. And as our friend of the podcast, Dan John, often says, the best coaches don't get tired of the basics. So the challenge that a lot of coaches in our industry run into is, unless you're in the world of rarefied sports performance, and as it happens, interesting enough, Pete, you're an interesting case study here because you are in the world of rarefied sports performance, where presumably infinitesimal marginal increases in the training methodology, the program design, the technical coaching will have meaningful impact on someone's career and their ability to perform, right? But for a lot of our listeners, that's not actually the case. They just need to get really, really good at the basics, right? They need to be good at push-ups, they need to be good at deadlifts, they need to be good at the basics of human movement. Well, the problem is most people will start to get bored after several years. After a certain point, a lot of coaches, they just can't bear to coach another deadlift. And there are a lot of things that go into this. Oftentimes, I have noticed this is correlated with the individual not being keeping up on their continuing education. However, the challenge here is a little bit of a double bind. If the individual is committed to consistently learning new things, they just get bored reading about what happens to the scapula and the shoulder blades. So they find themselves getting more and more interested in more and more complicated approaches to human movement, which may or may not be reflective of what we need working with general population. It may or may not be reflective of what is going to be helpful for your gym. And it might even be hurtful for what a traditional training gym needs, because not all of them, but most of these three-letter acronyms either came out of the world of rehabilitation or quote unquote prehab, right, from the world of physical therapy, or advanced performance, both of which, again, if your target demographic is 30 to 50 something, quote unquote, regular Joes, regular Jills, those types of methodologies, those specialties are not necessarily going to be helpful. Furthermore, we also run into the issue that when you analyze a lot of those systems, they don't always scale that well. And I'm confident there's going to be, and I'm excited about this. I'm going to give you a hug when you email me and you're mad at me. I'm confident there's a young, idealistic training gym owner that's only been open for 3 to 4 years, and they have the original staff of 3 to 4 people, and they have not had any turnover yet, and they haven't tried to grow beyond this, and they've got a small select community of individuals where they have figured out how to scale it in a smaller community. Then I think you can get away with this stuff. But I think the other challenge is the wheels start to fall off when you're looking to have a situation where a traditional training gym is going to see more turnover. And frankly, a lot of these modalities from a service perspective are not creating the experience that gets the average Joe and average Jill thrilled about what their training experience is. It doesn't always set them up to feel like I was successful. So I'll pull up there because I know we want to offer some solutions for this, but I'm just curious if anything struck you in that, if there's anything that comes to mind as I share my assessment. I mean, does that feel like that's a fair read, or am I missing part of the situation?
Oh, I completely agree. I had a moment of realization while you were talking where I spotted the fact that this might be partially my own fault inside of my own operation, because I am a big fan of preaching niching down. And I think some of my younger coaches see that as an opportunity to kind of establish a niche within our space. And so for
I
example,
am the fill in the blank person.
Yes,
I am the person that knows this
stretch assessment guy,
yes,
or I am the guy who gets FRC. Yes. Reach out to us and specifically ask for an FRC assessment, and I'm going to show you how we can do 90 minutes of cars, and it's going to change the game for you.
Right, right.
And
cars are great, by the way, listeners. I feel like I need to keep qualifying this. Like, I love these modalities. We're not knocking them. We're just giving you the training gym owner perspective.
We can't accomplish our objectives with 90 minutes of cars and only cars.
Oh, right.
And
nor will most of your clients be thrilled. Yes,
exactly. But they are complementary pieces of the programming puzzle.
It's very valuable. Very valuable.
It might not be the sexiest acronym right this moment in relation to where it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, but it's still part of it. I'm still seeing people do hit cars. I'm still seeing things in the programming. But I have been an advocate for finding your unique voice, talking about one thing until you feel like you've said it too much and people are starting to hear it then. So I won't say industry-wide because I realize I don't have that reach, but within my own operation, I have definitely nudged people into a mindset that might lead them toward chasing a singular methodology a little bit harder than maybe they should have. But I want to go further into this discussion of scale, because that's where the issue really lies for me. The problem is when somebody introduces a breathing drill that's so complex that it requires somebody to have their hands on your rib cage, and you need to have a straw and a balloon, and you're on your back, and other people in the room are like, what the hell is going on over in the warm-up area? And interns are just plain confused. There's basically a rule in our gym. If you're going to introduce new material, it's kind of got to pass the staff dialogue discussion before it hits the training floor.
A good principle.
And this kind of periodic programming meeting is important, because stuff like that can't sneak in unannounced and totally disrupt the environment. And we actually had intern orientation this morning, and John did a really good job. He made a great point to me where he's like, I don't know is never an okay answer. And he said, have you ever gone to a restaurant where you said, what's on tap for beer? And they just said, I don't know, and then just stared at you. It's like, no, absolutely not. It is, I'm not sure, let me go check. Mm-hmm. It's okay to say, I don't know that well right now. If you say, but that person over there does, and I'm going to get you a definitive answer. If the number of people on the training floor who don't know why something is in a program is larger than the number of day one interns, then you got a major problem, like a massive problem. And so these very coaching intensive, hands-on, just laborious protocols, they don't scale well when I'm trying to put 7 new evaluations through our gym this afternoon and put somewhere between 70 and 110, 120 athletes through the gym over a 7 or 8 hour span. We just need to we need to simplify sometimes. And it might mean that we're not using the most effective tools at our fingertips, but the reality is we're here to make some money too. And we handcuff ourselves when we get into so much complexity and nuance that we spend more time teaching people how to teach people. And then by the time everybody's figured it out, we've moved on to the next acronym anyway, and the last one wasn't cool.
Right.
I rant.
Yeah. Because I think at the heart of it, what we're really talking about here is how do we create good training programs, a good training service that does our best to honor the principles of human physiology and the best practices of what's going to consistently across a robust, broad population get good results, and allow within that the opportunity to get as individualized as we can within that model without the wheels falling apart and us not being able to offer our business. Because I think there is always going to be a little bit of a tension, because just for in the interest of this discussion, we might suggest that it's also probably possible, at least for our taste, right? Admittedly, we're a particular corner of the industry. So I often refer to those of us who came up around the same time from the same corner as the strengthcoach.com/performbetter/T-Nation corner of the industry. And for our values and our approach, part of the thing that's interesting, you and I having this perspective, is we are not anti three-letter acronym people. We are pro three-letter acronym people. And broadly, our corner of the industry is likely to be very critical of much of the rest of the industry, as they're often not rising to what we consider to be the minimum level standards of creating a good program that's going to get good results and not injure people. And I'm talking about even those of us that work mostly in the general population. So is it possible to go too far the other way, where it's like, yeah, whatever, just charge them $90 an hour. Let's just get 70 people in here. Just everybody's doing burpees for an hour. You're going to feel exhausted. It's fine. There is probably too far the other way. And I think what you're alluding to here, Pete, and I imagine many of our listeners can relate, and then I think we can offer potentially some solutions here, is it's also possible to go too far the other way, where in one's desire to make every bit of programming, every bit of technical coaching, a Mona Lisa-like symphony of unique artistry, that just doesn't work as the business goes. And I would say at this point, this is there's going to be room for debate about this, right? I would say at this point, as a trained gym owner that works with the general population, the most important variable is compliance. The most important variable is, are you getting in there? Are they getting a stimulus? Are they working out consistently? Are they enjoying themselves? Are they staying injury-free? That, to my mind, is more important than the absolutely 100% perfect program, right? And admittedly, this is a little bit different for MFF because I work mostly with general population. I don't have, a multi-million-dollar athlete and the performance of their shoulder, having a meaningful impact on the fate of a probably multi-billion-dollar professional sports organization. So we can have, I think, some room for debate about where this line lies, right? But we can probably all agree too far is a thing on either direction. And I would note part of the issue we're running into here that I think is often the case as a training gym owner is when you have a trainer go down this particular rabbit hole, is they now disagree with the owner and the trainer. They say, Eric Cressy, you are a capitalist sellout and you're putting lipstick on a pig. You are unwilling to have the integrity that I have as a training genius that has studied these arcane arts, and to do anything less than the incredible elite standards that I am capable of creating through my very specific assessments and protocols is to deny this human the wonder of human movement. So if I can share a particularly hilarious anecdote, this is a very funny story. So when we were at MFF and we were most being buffeted by the winds of the hurricane at PRI, because here's everything I will share. And again, I really want to not make the sign we're calling out any of these modalities, because the other thing is I will say is quite often, I don't think any of these individuals are trying to be gurus. And when you speak to them, they're often very laid back and very open-minded. But it does seem that there's something that gets almost like a religious like dogma with some of these modalities. I once had a trainer say to me that unless you've studied PRI, it's not possible to experience love in your heart. And the theory was, quite literally, because of polyvagal tone, you are incapable without a full exhalation to understand what compassion is. So we veer very quickly and truly into religious like dogma. And I could be remembering that story wrong, but that's actually my understanding was literally in those words, at which point I was like, you go too far, enough. And I shut that conversation down real quickly. So anyway, so we've now assessed, I think, what the kind of the core issue here is. And again, I just want to highlight part of the issue you're going to run into with some of your staff might be they just disagree with you. And that gets tough. I think this is the unspoken issue that happens in a lot of these organizations is the trainer believes they know more than the owner operator. Even if the owner operator is a trainer, they begin to believe, and maybe correctly, maybe not correctly, that they know more about training and their boss is a dum-dum. And they don't really care about the issues of the business, the scale of business. They just care about being what their perception is of the best possible trainer and or strength coach. And I think that is part of what needs to be addressed here, right? Is potentially acknowledging we're going to agree, disagree on this. I want to name the fact that you believe that I am incorrect and that your approach is better. And thank you for understanding. As Patrick Lencioni says, the leader's job is to break the tie. I have to do my good faith best to what I think is to create the best possible experience for the most people for what this business does in a way that allows us to grow the business such that we can keep the lights on and serve our mission, which, yes, is to provide the best possible training experience for these individuals. And where I perceive to be the constraints, the bumper plates, are X, right? Whatever that is. And of course, that makes it sound a lot easier than it is, because in practice, when you're having these conversations, it gets difficult because oftentimes, the trainer would retort, oh, no, but it's not that complicated. It's very simple. Just allow me to close the gym. If I have 5 days, I'll train the rest of the team. And this is to say nothing, Pete, of, I think, an issue that, I perhaps has been maybe even more contentious for you that we haven't experienced as much. As I have to imagine sometimes there might be warring 3-letter acronyms where the different trainers, there's now these turf wars because the trainers have beef because they think, well, your 3-letter acronym is, they're bullshit. They don't understand neurology, right? Oh, well, your 3-letter acronym is so stupid because you don't understand it's about the fascia, right? And the challenge is that your job as the owner operator is to manage these competing opinions and make sure everyone's on the same page and have clear standards and systems for what you can do and what you can't do. A great example of this is a specific tactic. SOP is, as Pete mentioned, you can't have something just show up on the floor that the rest of the coaches don't know about. You can't even, for many models, maybe this can work for your model, but many of the models that really have scale, you also can't have the trainer just teach somebody this very exotic, unique corrective exercise that nobody else knows how to do. Because if you have a model where people are at least ostensibly training with different people, if it's not a one-to-one model, right? If you're doing group, which most of our clients, most people work with do, you also run the risk of, well, I can only train with Billy. Billy's the only person that knows these very arcane, esoteric, obscure, mystical exercises from antiquity that are going to allow me to express a lot in my heart, which apparently I didn't feel until I started training with Billy. So are there any other thoughts you have about that, Peter? Any other solutions we can offer for our listeners if anyone is relating to us here?
Yeah, I have 3 things I want to hit before we close. The first, a disclaimer, and then a pair of suggestions. The disclaimer, because I don't want the hate mail in my inbox either, is that I can and probably will invest in continuing education of the 3-letter variety with my staff this year.
Oh yeah, totally. It's fantastic.
I have a continuing education budget that every staff member has to use. And it is not out of the realm of possibility that a PRI, an FRC, some sort of RKC, BFR, I don't know, they're all just swimming around in my head. I will put money toward that this year, and I will be psyched to see my team member come back and deliver an in-service on what they learned and explain where they think it will fit into our protocols. That's our rule. If I'm going to spend on your continuing ed, you're going to come back and you are going to take that concentrated information and deliver it to us through a microphone that speaks to the baseball population. That's the way we work. My 2 suggestions, 2 rules of thumb, if you have a staff member that has kind of gone down this rabbit hole. The first, I'd ask them to ask themselves, if we were to 2x our foot traffic tomorrow, what would be the most prohibitive exercises that I've programmed, that would just plain slow down the gym? I mean, what in here is so coaching intensive that it actually would become bottlenecks in our operation. that is a pretty good starting point to identify the red flags that are going to really slow us down. Doesn't mean they're absolute non-starters, but if a unanticipated wave of traffic came in, and we will quite literally 3 or 4x our foot traffic in like a 10-day span here with all the college kids coming back. And we need to ask ourselves questions like that. What's got to go? What have we had the liberty of programming during the down season that was fun because we got to go super, super specific in our programming for the last couple months, but we got to take that back because we've only got 5 power racks. We've only got 5, trap bars. We've only got a certain number of SSBs and plates, and we just can't, we can't have free reign anymore. That's the first question. The second one is what I am delivering to the client something that they could explain to a peer? Because we spend a lot of time explaining to our clients what they're doing and why they're doing it, because in reality, they're kind of my best salespeople. And so if they are riding on a bus to a game or sitting in bleachers next to a teammate and they're like, oh, you train at that place, tell me about it. And someone's like, well, you got to go there because you wouldn't believe like how my spine feels after I do cat camels. And like this stuff is just so out there. It's hard to get them to
I would say generally, I don't know that cat camel's the best example of a completely confusing thing, but I
don't know. Every time Frank Duffy has ever had me do one, he tells me I do them wrong.
Okay.
It slows the whole damn training session down.
I likely have an unsophisticated understanding, perhaps. I'll look forward to Frank coaching.
But my point is just, is it something that actually translates even to the layman to a degree? Because I count on my clients to go out and preach our message pretty aggressively. And we try and equip them to be really good cheerleaders outside of our space. And so we want them to ask questions. Why am I doing this? Where should I be feeling this? Am I going to see this in every program, or is this just here this time? Tell me more. More often than not, they're actually interested in that stuff. Sure, there are people who could give a shit. Like there are plenty of clients who are like, yep, don't care. Just tell me how to do it and get out of the way. But we tend to attract people who are interested in the educational component of it to a degree. And if we're further scaling up the bottlenecks by introducing like extended conversations on the training floor about understanding how we're mobilizing a joint, or I don't know, whatever it is, it's only slowing things down. So we're looking for kind of the minimum effective dose of nuance in this programming model, especially right now where we're really we're not overpopulating the gym, but we are certainly populating it as we fill it with college athletes here in the next couple months.
Yeah. And I guess I'll offer maybe in closing one warning and then maybe one final suggestion. It's a little counterintuitive. The first warning about all of this, why this is important for you as the owner operator to keep your arms around this, or potentially, depending on your facility, you might have a fitness director, sous chef that's responsible for this. But there needs to be somebody really running the show. You can't have the chickens running the roost. I don't know, whatever.
Inmates running the asylum.
Yeah. You need to have someone really running the show there with clear constraints. And I think you should also just accept, if you have a type of training gym and a type of team, this is a great problem that's very into learning. You are invariably going to run into this. You're going to run into the fact that some of your trainers are going to push the boundaries of what is scalable because they're being exposed to concepts that are great and are likely even making them a trainer, but won't necessarily scale, which is why it's important you use some of these heuristics that Pete had mentioned, which is you have to teach it to other people before it can go on the floor. The team has to take some responsibility for understanding, is this a thing that we can all coach at a very high level? And then ideally somebody who's in charge of this, because your warning is that what will happen is if you take a certain percentage of your clientele to a level of deep nerdery, they will start to rebel against any perceived attempted watering down. So even though they're looking at you as the expert now, they have essentially been sold and influenced by astronaut trainer that this level of very complicated, nuanced complexity, which even though you might think not only as an owner, but as a fitness professional is not valuable for that individual, they perceive that as valuable because a certain type of personality is going to love that kind of stuff. And it gets very hard to pull that back without them feeling like, oh, this is all watered down. I really like this place because we talk about autogenic inhibition all the time, right? So that's a warning. And then my final offering to this is a potential solution. And this one is not the most fun, but is potentially talking with this trainer about leaving and going to do their own thing, because there is a place for professional disagreement. And I think it's possible to do that in a way that is respectful and with care for each other. But the reality is, yes, if you are committed to the absolute best possible individual training experience, and you are not willing in any way to do anything other than individualized work, you likely don't belong in a model that's not doing one-on-one training, because all the things we've said aren't really an issue if there's one-on-one training people aren't sharing. If that's your model, you probably could get away with all of these things, and that's fine. That's great, because the reality is you don't need to scale right now. Are there maybe issues long-term for this individual's career if that's where they choose to go? Possibly, but I don't know. Maybe they just want to get paid several $100s an hour to do one-on-one stuff. Like that can be a very, very valid way to go. And in some cases, they might decide that they want to be a physical therapist, because that's often what happens with a lot of these situations. When you have a real astronaut trainer, at a certain point, they're going to run into the issues of their scope, right? A lot of states have legislation around this. I don't know if this is federal, but certainly the states, you can't do hands-on work unless you're at least an LMT. So to a certain point, they might decide that being a trainer in even a small group personal training, very high level training gym is not the right place in the profession. For them to have increasing levels of complexity and growth, they need to go back to school to be a physical therapist, because the things they're interested in, the way they want to help people, they are not able to do with their current legal scope of practice, their current intellectual abilities, frankly, because they've not gone through the appropriate schooling for it, and not within your model, which has its place, but is not the right place for all people all the time.
Yep. And it's probably worth noting that these intellectuals who have put a lot of this information on our radars, if they are of a reasonable amount of integrity, they would be absolutely mortified if they saw the improper execution of their supposed messaging in a lot of these places.
Yeah.
There are also the ones who would be mortified because they charge licensing fees for that, and you can't talk
in some
about
cases.
this.
Yes.
There are plenty of those people too. But God, some of them are really putting this information out because they just genuinely love it, and it is being so grossly just destroyed in execution by people who, know someone who knows someone who went to a weekend seminar and they had a couple conversations over drinks, and they're like, and
Yes.
now I am a practitioner of this variety. So this could go a lot of ways. However,
yes,
I'd say we're in lockstep, because our audience is typically people who want to run a high integrity, profitable operation. And this can be a little bit of a bottleneck for that objective.
Yes.
And so I hope this helps. I hope people have found some tools that they can use to speak to their team as it happens. And the dangerous thing about the maybe do you want to go work somewhere else approach, I find that kind of works like the surprisingly effective sales methodology of, I don't think we're a fit.
Yes.
Can I suggest someplace else? And they're like, nope, I'm going to give you my money. I decide where I'm going to spend it. Those staff members will be damned if they're told to leave. I'm going to force my agenda into this space. And that's a whole other argument. So.
Oh, yes, that's a whole other. Then the good news is now you're dealing with the more traditional, how do you manage around blatant insubordination, which is different than what's happening more often than not. And this hopefully is a final seed of encouragement to your listener, is that often you have some ability to navigate these things using a lot of the skills that business community talks about all the time. A lot of it is just communication skills, management, sharing feedback, being open to hearing feedback, working collaboratively, because this is a solvable thing, but it's something that, again, if you have a team that's really committed to performing at a high level, this is going to be a thing. It's likely going to be something you're going to run into on a pretty regular basis. And my final happy thought is that's probably better than no one's ever learning anything, and you never have issues because no one's thinking in any meaningful way about the training product.
Agreed.
Huzzah.
I can't wait to
friends.
watch somebody get tasked with assigning a label to this episode. What are we calling this one?
Yes, I know.
Make that Keeler's problem. That's what you get.
How
when
to
you
not
don't
let KFC ruin your business. All right, listeners, thank you so much. Please, as always, please like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, do not send us hate mail about the triple letter acronyms, which I hope we've qualified enough. We quite like. We're not mad at them, and we hope you found this helpful. This happens to you. We will see you on a podcast soon.
Bye-bye.